No. Oh, okay.
Hello and welcome to this Beyond Shakespeare exploring session. Today we'll be looking at the second half of Philotas by Samuel Daniel. We'll be starting at Act 4. Acts 1 through 3 are available on our YouTube channel. Philotas was published in 1605, may have been written slightly earlier, and it in fact got Daniel in trouble. It got him hauled before the Privy Council because Philotas, the general who draws the ire of Alexander the Great, was said to have borne a resemblance to the late rebellious Earl of Essex, who had been one of Daniel's patrons. Elizabeth and Essex were both dead by 1605, but James was not pleased anyway. This is a first look, which means we will read the play with occasional pauses for discussion. When we pause for discussion, I will ring this bell. We will include stage directions as we read. To read this play, we have assembled a marvelous team of readers. As Alexander the Great, a random Persian, and the chorus, we have...
Lynsey Beauchamp, actor in Kirkcaldy, Scotland.
As Alexandra's best friend forever, with little rainbow hearts, Ephestion, as well as Nicomacus and Sostratus, we have...
It's Tom from Brighton.
And as Attaras, Cebalinus, Belon, and Polidamus, we have...
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm from Stratford-on-Avon, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens, though I have very severe doubts about how this is going to end for at least one person.
I think we can safely say it won't end well. As Metron, Craterus, and a Grecian, we have...
Rachael, having trouble unmuting.
You know, we've all been there. As Philotas himself, and as Nuntius, the messenger, we have...
Desna from Lancaster.
Excellent. And in the small yet essential role of Caenus, we have...
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from Romford.
Excellent. And I am your host, Liza Graham, here in the city of London. Yeah, London. Anyway, I will give you a précis of the story so far in Samuel Daniel's own words. The argument he published with this play, I tried to come up with my own précis, but I can't put it more concisely than this. Philotas, the son of Parmenio, was a man of great estimation among the Macedonians, and next unto Alexander held to be the most valiant of the Greeks, patient of travail, exceeding bountiful, and one that loved his men and friends better than any nobleman of the camp, but otherwise noted of vainglory and prodigality, insomuch as his father, having notice of his carriage, warned him to make himself less than he was to avoid the envy of the camp, and the dislike of the king, who grew suspicious of him in respect of the greatness of his father and his own popularity, and by having intelligence of certain vaunts of his, used to Antigona, a fair courtesan, born in the city of Pydna, with whom, being in love, he let fall many brave words and boasts of a soldier to advance his own actions and his father's, terming Alexander at every word the young man. Which speeches Antigona revealing to a companion of hers were at length brought to Craterus, who, with the woman, carried them to Alexander, whereby Philotas lay open to all the advantages that might work his overthrow, and in the end concealing a conspiracy which was revealed unto him intended against the king, was thereby suspected to have been a party in the plot. And there, I think, is as far as we have got in the story. Philotas has been suspected. He's been interrogated by Alexander. He's been let off and invited to a dinner party. But then after the dinner party, he's now under suspicion again. The head of the conspiracy has revealed himself and committed suicide in the tradition of these plays. A little later on, there's also a content warning for graphic descriptions of violence. Which, you know, even for the early modern era, this stuff's a bit strong. So, here we are with Act 4, Scene 1. Two of Alexander's soldiers are gossiping amongst themselves, Sostratus and Attaras. And in your own time...
Can there be such a sudden change in court as you report? Is it to be believed that the great Philotas, whom we all beheld in grace last night, should be arraigned today?
It can be. And it is, as I report, for dates of grace and no sure holds in court.
But yet 'tis strange they should be overthrown before their certain forfeitures were known.
Harsh, it was breeding long, though suddenly this thundercrack comes but to break out now.
The time I waited, and I waited long, until Philotas with some other lords depart the presence. And as I conceived, I never saw the king in better mood, nor Philotas ever more in grace. Can such storm clouds grow, and yet no clouds appear?
Yea, court storms grow when skies there seem most clear. It was about the deepest part of the night, the blackest hour of darkness and of sleep, when with some other lords came Craterus, falls down before the king, entreats, implores, conjures his grace as ever he would look, to save his person and the state from spoil, now to prevent Philotas's practices, whom they had plainly found to be the man who had plotted the destruction of them all. The king would fain have put them off to time and farther day, till better proofs were known, which they, perceiving, pressed him still the more, and reinforced his dangers and their own, and never left him till they had obtained commission to apprehend Philotas straight. Now, to make fear look with more hideous face, or else but to beget it out of form, and careful preparations of distrust, about the palace men in armour watch, in armour men about the king attend. All passages and issues were forelaid with horse, to interrupt whatever news should hence break out into Parmenio's camp. I, with 300 men in armour charged, had warrant to attach and to commit the person of Philotas presently. And coming to his lodging where he lay, found him buried in the soundest sleep that ever man could be, where neither noise of clattering weapons or our rushing in with rude and trampling rumour could dissolve the heavy humours of that drowsy brow, which held perhaps his senses now more sad, as loath to leave because it was the last.
Aratus, what can treason's sleep so found? Will that lowered hand of horror that still beats upon the guilty conscience of distrust permit it to have so resolute a rest?
I cannot tell. Thus we found him there, nor could we, I assure you, waken him, till thrice I called him by his name, and thrice had shook him hard. And then at length he wakes, and looking on me with a settled cheer, "Dear friend, Attaras, what's the news?" said he. "What, up so soon to hasten the remove, or raised by some alarm or some distrust?" I told him the king had some distrust. "Why, what will Nabazanes play?" saith he. "The villain with the king, as he had done already with his miserable lord. I, seeing he would not or did not understand his own distress, told him the charge I had. Wherewith he rose, and rising, used these words: 'Oh, Alexander, now I see my foes have got above thy goodness, and prevailed against my innocency and thy word.' And as we then enchained and fettered him, looking on that base furniture of shame, 'Poor body,' said he, 'hath so many alarm raised thee to blood and danger from thy rest, to invest thee with this armour now at last? Is this the service I am called to now? But we that were not to attend his plaints, covering his head with a disgraceful weed, took and conveyed him suddenly to ward, from whence he shall be instantly brought forth, here to be arraigned before the king. who sits, according to his Macedonian use, in Cases' capital, himself as judge.
Well, then, I see. Who are so high above are near to lightning, that are near to Jove.
So, brief discussion break here, just to bring everyone up to speed. The story so far, I think these two have given us a pretty good recap, but just for clarity's sake, what just happened? Anyone? Bueller?
Well, Attaras just gave the news that our dear title character had been arrested. In quite wonderful detail, actually. I really like those two speeches, three, whatever it was, speeches of Attaras. They had a wonderful sort of Greek tragedy messenger quality to them of no death, but reporting what happened off stage. And actually in such a way you could picture in your mind's eye what had just happened. So yeah, really interesting. And a very interesting carry on from the previous act.
Yeah. It's what I find interesting is the way that Philotas is said to have received the news of his arrest. That they woke him up in the middle of the night. He was sleeping soundly. They were saying, well, traitors probably can't sleep so soundly, can they? So that implies that he must be innocent. And he says, what's going on? Do we have to move camp? Is there an alarm? And they're like, no, I've come to arrest you. Don't you hate when that happens? And we also get, sorry, I inhaled a cat hair. It's nothing more serious than that. We also get another piece of exposition, which is that Alexander will be the judge. It says in cases capital, which means in cases where the death penalty is a possibility. And we've got that lovely little couplet that ends the scene. I see who are so high above are near to lightning, that are near to Jove. And now, indeed, we do go on to the trial. Alexander, with all his counsel, the dead body of Dimnus, who was the head of the conspiracy, the revealers of the conspiracy, and our man Philotas. So, Alexander, your greatness, in your own time, take it away.
The heinous treason of some few had like to rent me from you, worthy soldiers. But by the mercy of the immortal gods I live, enjoy your sight, your reverend sight, which makes me more to bore those parricides, not for mine own respect, but for the wrong you had received if their design had stood, since I desire but life to do you good. But how will you be moved when you shall know who were the men that did attempt this shame? When I shall show that which I grieve to show, and name such as would God I could not name, but that the foulness of their practice now blots out all memory of what they were. And though I would suppress them, yet I know this shame of theirs will never but appear. Parmenio is the man, a man, you see, bound by so many merits, both to me and to my father and our ancient friend, a man of years, experience, gravity, whose wicked minister Philotas is, who here Demetrius, Lucullus, and this Dimnus, whose dead body here you see, with others, hath suborned to slaughter me. And here comes Metron with Nicomacus, to whom this murdered wretch at first revealed the project of this whole conspiracy, to aver as much as was disclosed to him. Nicomacus, look here, advise thee well. What, dost thou know this man that here lies dead?
My sovereign lord, I know him very well. It is one Determius, who did 3 days since bewray to me a treason practiced by him and others to have slain your grace.
Where or by whom or when did he report this wicked act should be accomplished?
He said, within 3 days your majesty should be within your chamber murdered by special men of nobility, of whom he many named, and they were these: Lucius, Demetrius, Archipolis, Nicandor, Amitas, Luclius, Drocius, Aphobus, and himself.
Thus much as brother Cebalinus did reveal to me from out this youth's report.
And so much with the circumstance of all did I unto Philotas intimate.
Then what hath been his mind, who did suppress the information of so foul a train? Yourselves, my worthy soldiers, may well may guess, which dimness death declares not to be vain. Poor Cebalinus not a moment stays to redischarge himself of such a weight. Philotas, careless, fearless, nothing weighs, nor aught reveals. His silence shows deceit, and tells he was content it should be done, which, though he were no party, makes him one. For he that knew upon what power he stood, and saw his father's greatness and his own, saw nothing in the way which now withstood his vast desires, but only this, my crown, which in respect that I am Isulus, he thinks the rather easy to be attained. But yet Philotas is deceived in this. I have who shall inherit all I gained. In you I have both children, kindred, friends. You are the heirs of all my purchases, and whilst you live, I am not Isulus. And that these are not shadows of my fears, for I fear naught but want of enemies. See what this intercepted letter bears, and how Parmenio doth his sons advise. This shows their ends. Hold, read it, Craterus.
My sons, first have a special care unto yourselves, then unto those which do depend on you. So shall you do what you intend to do.
See but how close he writes, that if these lines should come unto his sons as they are sent, they might encourage them in their designs, and if enterprised, might mock the ignorant. But now you see what was the thing was meant. You see the father's care, the son's intent. And what if he, as a conspirator, was not by dimness named among the rest? That shows not his innocency, but his power, whom they account too great to be suppressed, and rather will accuse themselves than him, for that whilst he shall live, there's hope for them. And how he hath borne himself in private sort, I will not stand to urge, it's too well known, nor what hath been his arrogant report, to embase my actions and to brag his own, nor how he mocked my letter, which I wrote, to show him of the style bestowed on me. By the oracle of Jove, these things I thought but weaknesses and words of vanity, yet words that read the ulcers of his heart, which I suppressed, and never ceased to yield the chief rewards of worth, and still compart the best degrees and honours of the field, in hope to win his love. Yet now, at length, there have I danger, where I looked for strength. I would to God my blood had rather been poured out, the offering of an enemy, than practised to be shed by one of mine. That one of mine should have this infamy. Have I been so reserved from fears, to fall there where I ought not to have feared at all? Have you so oft advised me to regard the safety which you saw me running from, when with some hot pursuit I pressed hard my foes abroad, to perish thus at home? But now that safety only rests in you, which you so oft have wished me look unto. And now unto your bosoms must I fly, without whose will I will not wish to live. And with your wills I cannot, lest I give due punishment unto this treachery.
Attaras, bring the hateful prisoner forth. This traitor, which have fought to undo us all, to give us up to slaughter, and to make our blood a scorn here in this barbarous land, that none of us should have returned back unto our native country, to our wives, our aged parents, kindred, and our friends, to make the body of this glorious host a most deformed trunk, without a head, without the life or soul to guide the same.
O thou base traitor, impious parricide, who makest me loathe the blood that matched with thine, and if I might but have my will, I vow thou shouldst not die by other hand than mine.
Fie, Caenus, what a barbarous course is this? He first must to his accusation plead, and have his trial formal to our laws, and let him make the best of his bad cause. Philotas, here the Macedonians are, to judge your fact. What language wilt thou use?
The Persian language, if it please your grace. For that, besides the Macedonians here, are many that will better understand. If I shall use the speech your grace hath used, which was, I hold, unto no other end, but that the most men here might understand.
See how his native language he disdains, but let him speak at large as he desires, so long as you remember he doth hate, besides the speech, our glory and the state.
Black are the colours laid upon the crime, wherewith my fate stands charged, my worthy lords. That as behind in fortune, so in time, I come too late to clear the same with words. My condemnation is gone out before my innocency and my just defence, and takes up all your hearts and leaves no door for mine excuse to have an entrance. That destitute of all compassion now, betwixt an upright conscience of desert and an unjust grace, I know not how to satisfy the time of mine own heart. Authority looks with so stern an eye upon this woeful bar, and must have still such an advantage over misery, as that it will make good all that it will. He who should only judge my cause is gone, and why he would not stay, I do not see, since when my cause were heard, his power alone as well might then condemn as set me free. Nor can I by his absence now be cleared, whose presence hath condemned me thus unheard. And though the grievance of a prisoner's tongue may both superfluous and disgraceful seem, which doth not sue, but shows the judge his wrong, yet pardon me, I must not disesteem my rightful cause for being despised, nor must forsake myself, though I am left of all. Fear cannot make my innocency unjust, and to itself to give my truth the fall. And I had rather, feeling how my fortune draws, my words should be deformed than my cause. I know that nothing is more delicate than is the sense and feeling of a state, the clap, the bruit, the fear but of a hurt, in king's behalfs, thrusts with that violence the subject's will to prosecute, to report, as they condemn, ere they discern the offence.
Philotas, you deceive yourself in this, that you think to win compassion and belief by impugning justice, and to make men guess we do you wrong out of our heat of grief, or that our palace or passion did lay more on your misfortune than your own deserts, or have not well discerned your fact before, or without due proof your state subvert. These are the usual themes of traitors' tongues. You practice mischiefs and complain of wrongs. Your treasons are too manifestly known to mask in other livery than your own.
Think not that we are set to charge you here with bare suspicions, but with open fast, and with a treason that appears as clear as is the fun, and as is the sun, and known to be your aft.
What is this treason? Who accuses me?
The process of the whole conspiracy.
But where's the man that names me to be one?
Here, this dead traitor shows you to be one.
How can he, dead, accuse me of the fame whom living he nor did, nor yet could name?
But he can other testimony show from those who were your chiefest complices.
I am not to be adjudged in law, you know, by testimony, but by witnesses. Let them be here produced unto my face, that can avouch me a party in this case. My lords and fellow soldiers, if of those whom dimness nominated, anyone out of his tortures will a word disclose, to show I was a party, I have done. Think not so great a number ever will endure their torments and themselves accuse, and leave me out, since men in such a case still will rather slander others than excuse. Calamity malignant is, and he that suffers justly for his guiltiness eases his own affliction but to see others tormented in the same distress. And yet I fear not whatsoever they by racks and tortures can be forced to say. Had I been one, would dimness have concealed my name, being held to be principal? Would he not for his glory have revealed the best to him, to whom he must tell all? Nay, if he falsely then had named me one, to grace himself, must I of force be one? But alas, if Cebalinus had not come to me and given me note of this conspiracy, I had not stood here now, but been as free from question as I am from treachery. That is the only cloud that thundereth on my disgrace, which had I deemed true, or could but have divined of dimness death, Philotas had, my lords, sat there with you. My fault was to have been too credulous, wherein I showed my weakness, I confess.
Philotas, what? A monarch? And confess your imperfections and your weakness?
Sorry, mute issue. O Craterus, do not insult upon calamity. It is a barbarous grossness to lay on the weight of scorn, where heavy misery too much already weighs men's fortunes down. For if the cause be ill I undergo, the law and not reproach must make it so.
There's no reproach can ever be too much to lay on traitors whose deserts are such.
Men use the most reproaches where they fear the cause will better prove than they desire.
But sir, a traitor's cause that is so clear as this of yours will never need that fear.
I am no traitor, but suspected one, for not believing a conspiracy. And mere suspect by law condemneth none. They are approved facts for which men die.
The law in treasons doth the will correct with like severeness as it doth the effect. The affection is the essence of the offense, the execution only but the accidents. To have but willed it is to have done the fame.
I did not
Same, to have done the same.
I did not err in will, but in belief. And if that be a traitor, then I am the chief.
Yea, but your will made your belief consent to hide the practice till the accomplishment.
Belief turns not by motions of our will, and it was but the event that made that ill. Some facts men may excuse, though not defend, where will and fortune have a diverse end. The example of my father made me fear to be too forward to relate things heard, who, writing to the king, wished him forbear the potion his physician had prepared. For that he heard Darius tempted had his faith with many talents to be untrue, and yet his drugs, in the end, not proving bad, did make my father's care seem more than due. For oft, by an untimely diligence, a busy faith may give a prince offence. So that what shall we do? If we reveal we are despised, suspected if we conceal, and as for this, wherever now thou be, Alexander, thou hast pardoned me. Thou hast already given me my hand, thy hand, the earnest of thy reconciled heart. And therefore now, O let thy goodness stand unto thy word, and be thou as thou wert. If thou believest me, then I am absolved. If pardoned me, my fetters are dissolved. What have I else deserved since yesternight, when at thy table I such grace did find? What heinous crime hath since been brought to light to wrong my faith and to divert thy mind? That from a restful, quiet, most profound sleeping in my misfortunes made secure, both by thy hand and by a conscience found, I must be waked for gyves, for robes impure, for all disgrace that on me wrath could lay, and see the worst of shame ere I saw the day, when I least thought that others' cruelty should have wrought more than thine own clemency.
Philotas, whatsoever gloss you lay upon your rotten cause, it is in vain. Your pride, your carriage, ever did bewray your discontent, your malice and disdain. You cannot palliate mischief, but it will throw all the fair coverings of deceit be always seen. We know those streams of ill flowed from that head that fed them with conceit. You foster malcontents, you entertain all humors, you all fashions must embrace, you vaunt your own exploits, and you disdain the king's proceedings and his styled disgrace. You promise mountains, and you draw men on, with hopes of greater good than hath been seen. You bragged of late that something would be done, whereby your concubine should be queen. And now we see the thing that should be done. But God be praised, we see you first undone.
Ah, do not make my nature, if it had so pliable a stern of disposition, to turn to every kindness to be bad, for doing good to men of all condition. Make not your charity to interpret all is done for favour, to be done for show, and that we in our bounties prodigal upon our ends, not on men's needs bestow. Let not my one day's error make you tell that all my lifetime I did never well, and that because this falls out to be ill, that what I did tend unto this ill. It is unjust to join to a present fact more of time past than it hath ever had, before to do withal, as if it lacked sufficient matter else to make it bad. I do confess, indeed, I wrote something against this title of the son of Jove, and that not of the king, but to the king. I freely use these words out of my love, and thereby hath that dangerous liberty of speaking truth with trust on former grace betrayed my meaning unto enmity and drawn an argument of my disgrace. So that I see, though I speak what I ought, it was not in that manner as I ought. And God forbid that every soldier's words should be made liable unto misdeeds. When fainting in their march, tired in the fight, sick in their tent, stopping their wounds that bleed, or hot and jolly after conquest got, they shall out of their heat use words unkind. Their deeds deserve to have them rather thought, the passion of the season in their mind. For soldiers' joy or wrath is measureless, wrapped with an instant motion. And we blame, we hate, we praise, we pity in excess, according as our present passions frame. Sometimes to pass the ocean we would fain, sometimes to other worlds, and sometimes slack and idle with our conquests entertain, a sullen humour of returning back. All which conceits one trumpet's sound doth end, and each man running to his rank doth lose what in our tents disliked us, and we spend all that conceived wrath upon our foes. And words, if they proceed of levity, are to be scorned, of madness pitied, if out of malice or of injury to be remissed or unacknowledged. For of themselves they vanish by disdain, but if persuade, they will be thought not vain.
But words, according to the person, weigh. If his designs are heinous, so are they. They are the tinder of sedition still, wherewith you kindle fires, inflame men's will.
Craterus, you have the vantage of the day. The law is yours to say what you will say. And yet doth all your gloss but bear the sense only of my misfortune, not offence. Had I pretended mischief to the king, could not I have effected it without dimness? Did not my free access bring continual means to have brought the same about? Was not I, since I heard the thing described, alone and armed in private with his grace? What hindered me that then I had not tried to have done that mischief, having time and place?
Philotas, even the providence above, protectress of the sacred state of kings, that never suffers treachery to have good counsel, never in this case, but brings confusion to the actors, did undo your heart in what you weren't about to do.
But yet despair, we see, doth thrust men on, seeing no way else to undo, ere be undone.
That same despair doth likewise let men fall in that amaze they can do naught at all.
Well, my lords, my service hath made known the faith I owe my sovereign and the state. Philotas' forwardness hath ever shown unto all nations at how high a rate I prize my king, and at how low my blood to do him honour and my country good.
We blame not what you have been, but what you are. We accuse not here your valour, but your fact. Not to have been a leader in the war, but an ill subject in a wicked act. Although we know, thrust rather with the love of your own glory than with your duty lead. We have done much, yet all your courses prove you tied still your achievements to the head of your own honour. When it hath been meet, you had laid them down at your sovereign's feet. God gives to kings the honour to command, to subject, all their glory to obey. Who ought in time of war as rampiers stand, in peace 1,000 ornaments of state array. The king hath recompensed your services with better love than you show thankfulness. By grace he made you greater than you were. By nature you received that which he not tied to give to you. His gift was far more dear than all you did in making you employed, but say your service hath deserved it all. This one offence hath made it odious to all. And therefore here in vain you use that mean to plead for life, which you have cancelled clean.
My lord, you far mistake me if you deem I plead for life. That poor weak blast of breath, from which so oft I ran with light esteem, and so well have acquainted me with death. No, no, my lords, it is not that I fear, it is mine honour that I seek to clear, and which, if my disgraced cause would let the language of my heart be understood, is all which I have ever fought to get, and which, oh, leave me now and take my blood. Let not your envy go beyond the bound of what you seek. My life stands in your way. That is your aim. Take it. And do not wound my reputation with that wrong, I pray. If I must needs be made the sacrifice of envy, and that no oblation will, the wrath of kings, but only blood suffice, yet let me have something left that is not ill. Is there no way to get unto our lives, but first to have our honour overthrown? Alas, though grace of kings all greatness gives, it cannot give us virtue. That's our own. Though all be theirs, our hearts and hands can do, yet that by which we do is only ours. The trophies that our blood erects unto their memory to glorify their powers, let them enjoy, yet only to have done worthy of grace, let not that be undone. Let that high swelling river of their fame leave humble streams that feed them yet their name. Oh, my dear father, didst thou bring that spirit, those hands of valour that so much have done in this great work of Asia, this to merit, by doing worthily, to be undone? And hast thou made this purchase of thy sword to get so great an empire for thy lord, and so disgraced a grave for thee and thine, to extinguish by thy service all thy line? One of thy sons by being too valorous, but 5 days since, yet, oh well, lost his breath. Thy dear Nicanor, the half arch of thy house, and here now the other at the bar of death, stands overcharged with wrath in far worse case, and is to be confounded with disgrace. Thyself must give the acquittance of thy blood for others' debts to whom thou hast done good, which, if they would a little time afford, death would have taken it without a sword. Such the rewards of great employments are. Hate kills in peace, whom fortune spares in war. And this is that high grace of kings we seek, whose favour and whose wrath consumes alike.
Lo, here is the misery of kings, whose cause, however just it be, however strong, yet in respect they may, their greatness draws the world to think they ever do the wrong. But this foul fact of yours you stand upon, Philotas, shall, besides the apparency which all the world sees plain, ere we have done, by your own mouth he made to satisfy the most stiff partialists that will not see.
My mouth will never prove so false, I trust, unto my heart to show itself unjust. And what I here do speak, I know, my lords. I speak with mine own mouth. But otherwhere what may be said, I say, may be the words, not of my breath, but fame that oft doth err. Let the oracle of Ammon be inquired about this fact, who, if it shall be true, will never suffer those who have conspired against Jove's son to escape without their due, but will reveal the truth. Or if this shall not seem convenient, why then lay on all the tortures that may force a tongue to tell the secretest thought that could imagine ill.
What need we send to know more than we know? That were to give you time to acquaint your friends with your estate, till some combustion grow within the camp, to hasten on your ends. And that the gold and all the treasury committed to your father's custody in Medea now might arm his disparate troops to come upon us and to cut our throats. What? Shall we ask of Jove that which he hath revealed already? But let's send to give thanks that by him the king have scaped the wrath of thee, disloyal traitor, and doth live.
Let's tear the wretch in pieces. Let us rend with our own hands the traitorous parricide. That was a guard speaking. Alexander now re-enters.
Peace, Belon. Silence, loving soldiers. You see, my lords, out of your judgment's grave, that all excuses sickly colours have. And he that hath thus false and faithless been must find out other gods and other men whom to forswear, and whom he may deceive. No words of his can make us more believe his impudence. And therefore, seeing 'tis late, we till morning do dismiss the court.
And we do break for discussion. Rachael.
I kind of love this scene with the way that it ends. Because when Alexander leaves, it kind of sounded like he was telling them what decision he wanted this, court to come to, and that it was sort of a kangaroo court, and that Philotas, he wanted a guilty verdict to come back. So the guard, saying this at the end, and then Alexander coming back in, it's almost like the Lord Mayor shows that we've done, that he's walked out, paraded about the camp, and led them back or something, to sort of show the support that he has still with the, common people or the common soldier, that these I guess more higher rank guys were trying to overthrow him. Like some pageantry. Like, I feel like if you threw in like pageantry and extravagance, it would really it could really twist the scene nicely.
Yeah, it wouldn't be out of place, would it? Because Philotas keeps talking about what he's criticizing is Alexander's hubris in declaring himself the son of Jove, the son of Zeus. And so it would be interesting to associate some pageantry with Alexander here. Like, the court scenes always involve a little bit of ritual, but it would be, since this is Alexander in Persia, and he's now essentially emperor of Persia as well as Macedonia and most of Greece. Yeah, it would be. Wearing T-shirts that say like Philotas was right. Desna, what do as Philotas? How did you find this scene?
So obviously, I haven't had a chance to read it through before this evening. So I'm reading for the first time, reading aloud and comprehending simultaneously. I feel that Philotas is starting to come to terms with not having much in his future, but is continuing to kind of, to argue that he's innocent in spirit, if not in fact, and but it feels like he's getting closer and closer to accepting perhaps a verdict that he doesn't want.
Tom, then Elizabeth.
Thank you. There's not only the intrigue of court and all of these these things where you can come undone just because you have enemies at court with the different factions vying for favor. But I love the background where men at arms, if you will, had to go through so much tiredness and exuberance and misery and boredom, but elation and all of that went to the side when the trumpet called and they went to their stations. And you have to allow that roughness of the campaigning soldier as opposed to the people at court who may never have gone into the front lines.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like in one of his speeches, Philotas makes the point that, you know, there's going to be anger around, and you can either, as a soldier, vent it on your foes or on each other. And that wonderful line, hate kills in peace whom fortune spares in war. Elizabeth, we come to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really love the pace of this scene, because I was like, it wasn't like looking for the end of the scene. I was just had a sense of like, oh, this has been going on for a while. And as each character speaks, it's like they're moving a piece on a chessboard, and it's like each of the speeches adds a little bit more to the narrative. However, I feel like the conclusion is already certain. It's like we know what's going to happen to Philotas.
Yeah, there is that sense of a net tightening. Lynsey.
Yes, I thought as this was, you know, Alexander made his exit. I'm sure he's eavesdropping from somewhere, but he makes his exit, and I just think a lot of the arguments advanced are very interesting. I mean, it would be very interesting to kind of break them down and analyze them, you know, in a different universe to the podcast that we're in tonight. But I think it then turns to Philotas saying, "Oh, well, I'm not actually trying to persuade you not to kill me. I just want to, you know, not die with dishonor, because I don't deserve that." I'm not sure if that's true. But they are about, I mean, the sort of senators or whoever it is, the friends of Alexander who are listening to him are about to rip him to shreds. And Alexander returns to stop that and to you know, dismiss the court until the next day. And I'm guessing that's because Alexander doesn't want Philotas to be murdered, because who then can say that Philotas wasn't innocent? I mean, Alexander has to have a guilty verdict publicly proclaimed, I think, in order for history to tell the story that he wants it to tell.
Yeah, I mean, as others have said, he pretty much does say up front that he needs that guilty verdict. But Elizabeth is also right about the pace. This is a very nice, very tightly written courtroom drama, almost a little play in itself, this scene. And I was thinking at first that it gave me Inns of Court vibes, but of course this isn't a trial at law, this is a court-martial, which is different. Now the scene shifts. We've been among the great Alexander, Ephestion, and the generals, and now we see a random Greek talking to a random Persian about the state of the world, as Act 5 begins, a Grecian and a Persian. Take it away.
Well, then I see there is small difference betwixt your state and ours. You civil Greeks, you great contrivers of free governments, whose skill the world from out all countries seeks, those whom you call your kings are but the same as are our sovereign tyrants of the East. I see they only differ but in name. The effects they show agree, or near at least. Your great men here, as our great satrapes, I see laid prostrate are with basest shame upon the least suspect or jealousies your kings conceive, or others' envies frame. Only herein they differ, that your prince proceeds by form of law to effect his end. Our Persian monarch makes his frown convince the strongest truth, his sword. The process ends with present death and makes no more ado. He never stands to give a gloss unto his violence, to make it to appear in other hue than that it ought to bear, wherein plain dealing best his course commends. For more offends who by the law offends. What need hath Alexander so to strive by all these shows of form to find this man guilty of treason, when he doth contrive to have him so adjudged? Do what he can, he must not be acquit, though he be clear. The offender, not the offense, is punished here. And what avails the fair condemned to speak? However strong his cause, his state is weak.
Ah, but it satisfies the world, and we think that well done, which done by law we see.
And yet your law serves but your private ends, and to the compass of your power extends. But is it for the majesty of kings to sit in judgment thus themselves with you?
To do men justice is the thing that brings the greatest majesty on earth to kings.
That by their subalternate ministers may be performed as well and with more grace. For to command it to be done infers more glory than to do. It doth embase the opinion of a power to invulgar so that sacred presence which should never go, never be seen, but e'en as gods below, like to our Persian king in glorious show, and who as stars affixed to their sphere may not descend to be from what they are.
Where kings are so like gods, their subjects are not men.
Your king begins this course, and what will you be then?
Indeed, since prosperous fortune gave the rein to headstrong power and lust, I must confess, we Graecians have lost deeply by our gain, and this our greatness makes us much the less. For by the ascension of these mighty states, which Alexander wondrously hath got, he hath forgot himself and us, and rates his state above mankind, and ours at naught. This hath thy pomp, O feeble Asia, wrought. Thy base adornings hath transformed the king into the shape of pride, as he is brought out of his wits, out of acknowledging from whence the glory of his greatness springs, and that it was our swords that wrought these things. How well were we within the narrow bounds of our sufficient yielding Macedon, before our king enlarged them with our wounds, and made these sallies of ambition. Before we came to give the regal law to those free states which kept their crowns in awe, they by these large dominions are made more, but we become far weaker than before. What get we now by winnings but wide minds and weary bodies, with the expense of blood? What should ill do, since happy fortune finds but misery, and is not good though good? Action begets still action, and retains our hopes beyond our wishes, drawing on a never-ending circle of our pains, that makes us not have done when we have done. What can give bounds to Alexander's ends, who counts the world but small that calls him great, and his desires beyond his prey distends, like beasts that murder more than they can eat? When shall we look his travels will be done, that tends beyond the ocean and the sun? What discontentments will there still arise in such a camp of kings to intershock each other's greatness, and what mutinies will put him from his comforts, and will mock his hopes, and never suffer him to have that which he hath of all which fortune gave. And from Philotas' blood, O worthy man, whose body now rent on the torture lies, will flow that vein of fresh conspiracies, as overflow him will, do what he can. For cruelty doth not embetter man, but them more wary makes than they have been.
Are not your great men free from tortures then? Must they be likewise racked as other men?
Treason affords a privilege to none. Who like offends hath punishment all one.
Yes, it says exeunt here, but I reckon they actually stay on stage through the following scene because the Grecian and the Persian have a little more to say. But enter Polidamus and Sostratus.
Friend Sostratus, come. Have you ever known such a distracted face of court as now? Such a distrustful eye as men are grown to fear themselves and all, and do not know where is the side that shakes not, who looks best in this foul day, the oppressor or the oppressed? What posting, what dispatches, what advice, what search, what running, what discoveries? What rumours, what suggestions, what device to clear the king? Please, people, hold the wise, restrain the rude, crush the suspected sort at unawares, ere they discern they are hurt. So much the fool of such a weighty peer doth shake the state, and with him tumble down all whom his beams of favours did bear. All who to rest upon his base were known, and none that did but touch upon his love are free from fear to perish with his love. Myself, whom all the world have known to embrace Parmenio in the entireness of my heart, and ever in all battles, every chase of danger fought still next him on that part, was seized on this last night, late in my bed, and brought into the presence of the king, to pay, I thought, the tribute of my head. But oh, 'twas for a most abhorred thing. I must redeem my danger with the blood of this dear friend, this dear Parmenio's blood. His life must pay for mine. These hands must gore that worthy heart for whom they fought before.
What, hath the king commanded such a deed? To make the hearts of all his subjects bleed? Must that old worthy man Parmenio die?
Oh, Sostratus, he hath his doom to die, and we must yield unto necessity. For coming to the king, and there received with unexpected grace, he thus began. Polidamus, we both have been deceived in holding friendship with that faithless man, Parmenio, who for all his glozing mine, thou seest have fought to cut my throat and thine. And thou must work revenge for thee and me, and therefore haste to Media speedily. Take these 2 letters here, the one from me unto my sure and trusty servants there, the other signed with Philotas' seal, as if the same to his father written were. Carry them both. Effect what I have said. The one will give access, the other aid. I took the letters, vowed to effect the same, and here I go, the instrument of shame.
But will you charge your honour with this shame?
I must, or be undone with all my name. For I have left all the adamantine ties of blood and nature that can hold a heart chained to the world. My brethren and allies, the hostages to caution for my part, and for their lives must I dishonour mine. Else should the king rather have turned his this sword upon my heart, than forced it impiously, having done all fair service to his lord, now to be employed in this foul villainy. Thus must we do who are enthralled to kings, whether they will just or unlawful things. But now, Parmenio, oh, methinks I see thee walking in the artificial grove of pleasant Sufis. When I come to thee, and thou remembering all our ancient love, haste to embrace me, saying, "Oh, my friend, my dear Polidamus, welcome, my friend. Well, art thou come, and that we may sit and chat of all the old adventures we have run? 'Tis long, Polidamus, since we two met. How doth my sovereign lord, how doth my son, when I, vile wretch, whilst me answer he attends, with his hand give the letter. This hand ends his speaking joy, and stabs him to the heart, and thus Parmenio thou rewarded art for all thy service. Thou that didst agree for Alexander to kill Attaras. For Alexander, I must now kill thee. Such are the judgments of the heavenly powers. We others ruins work, and others ours.
Why, this is right. Now Alexander takes the course of power. This is a Persian trick. This is our way. Here, public trial makes no doubtful noise, but buries clamor quick.
Indeed, now Persia hath no cause to rue, for you have us undone, who undid you.
Happy little bell. So two really interesting scenes there of people commenting on the action. I'm guessing we will never see Philotas again. We will just hear about what happens to him. And so I love the Greek and the Persian. They're, the Persian is used to living in a dictatorship where dictators just kill people if they want to. And he doesn't understand why the Greeks want to go through this form of law if the effect is just going to be the same, that the king kills whoever he wants to kill. Valid question by that Persian, Lynsey.
Yes, it's a bit like is it in Raiders of the Lost Ark where Indiana Jones just takes out a gun and shoots the other person, rather than this extended duel. I may be getting my movies mixed up, but it just has that kind of feeling of just why waste time when the end is gonna happen. Very interesting that these two characters who don't even have names just get to comment on what's happening politically and the methods by which right and wrong are discerned. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and Rachael.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Graecian's speech. You could really take that out of, even if you took that out of the context of this play, it still has it still rings true now. I think it makes me think of the U.S. that we go and forcibly put democracy on people and say what their borders are and choose set up a whole thing when this is a system we came to ourselves, and how complete is that? I read a short story in Dutch once called I think it's pronounced Hoe ik een moordenaar bekomt, which means how I became a murderer. And it's a science fiction story about these people. They're just these farmers on this planet, and then this empire comes and forces democracy on them, and the guy who's the main character of the short story, he's given the job of being a murderer. That's put upon him, and he's like, I'm just a a farmer. I don't want to be a murderer. So it has sort of that sort of I don't know, twist of a knife at a system of things.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I really liked what Rachael was saying there, and there was this moment of tension where I think it's Polidamus says, "For all thy service thou that didst agree for Alexander to kill Attalus, for Alexander I must now kill thee." I was just like, oh no, because I knew it was coming, but then this is a great moment of drama, and it's just speaking to like early modern plays that they would announce the killing. Polydamas would announce the killing, before he does it, because that give, I think, Sostratus a chance to run away.
It might. It's also, I mean, it's the honorable thing. He's not gonna sneak up behind him or kill him while he's sleeping. He's gonna first hand him the Alexander's judgment and then do the deed. And you can see it's killing the guy, because he's been Parmenio's best friend. He's been Parmenio's right hand in combat. These are two guys who trust each other with their lives, and Alexander, presumably to prove Polydamas' loyalty, has now demanded that he kill his best friend with his own hand, which is, rather than bring him to Alexander and let an executioner do it, or let Alexander do it. We see Alexander descending from enlightenment to barbarism, possibly. Lynsey.
Yeah, just to sort of, follow on from what you've just said, it's that method of tyrants where they just say, if you love me and are loyal to me, you'll do this. And if you don't do this, you're obviously not.
Yeah, it is like that they're is it loyalty or principle? I'm reminded of the late Colin Powell, who at many times in his life acted with great principle, and on a couple of memorable but very determinative occasions compromised his principles for the sake of loyalty to an administration which got the world in great trouble. Rachael.
I was just waving to Eric, who's lurking in the dark.
Oh, let's all wave to Eric. And Tom, what do you wish?
Again, within this seething martial culture, it seems to be like The Irishman, where they have that wonderful line, and you realise this is just business, and they, like The Sopranos and The Irishman, these are killers. There is some sort of you give the kiss of death before doing the act on some people that you respect, but you kill as part of your work. You kill, and it's to be expected. So I had that lovely line where Philotas just says, I'm not frightened of dying. It's just one or two breaths. It's like one or two hot breaths, and I've been in battle before. I've seen it all. So it's a martial culture which resonates with all martial cultures, be them samurai or Greeks or whatever. It's fabulous stuff.
Yeah, it is. But yet, as Polydamas finds, there's this very real distinction between being a soldier and being and being essentially a murderer, even if a state-sanctioned one. Greg.
That was a gut punch. I mean, I read that totally blind, so it was a real gut punch from finding that point where, especially that conversation he imagines between him and Parmenio. I mean, that was just horrific to read, and actually was interesting because I read it almost as though I was actually having the conversation because I actually didn't know what was coming next, and it was like, oh my cripes, this is getting painful. And yeah, it's a I can't remember if he appears earlier in the play, but I don't remember Polidamus appearing any earlier. So it's interesting how characters are introduced literally just to bring that plot element in.
Yeah, and they're introduced they're introduced to talk about other characters and to widen the world by reporting actions. Like, he doesn't come on stage to do something, he comes on stage to tell us that he's been told to do something and that he must now go do it, which is I don't know, it's a really interesting form of drama. You see, I mean, it goes back to the Greeks. So much action happens through people reporting things. As now we are about to find out what Philotas' fate has been via Nuntius, a messenger, who now enters. We don't know whether the previous characters stay on stage to hear this or not. That would be interesting to speculate. But Nuntius has some things to tell us, and those things are not pretty. In your own time.
This work is done. The sad catastrophe of this great act of blood is finished now. Philotas ended half the tragedy.
Now, my good friend, I pray thee tell us how.
As willing to relate as you to hear, a full-charged heart is glad to find an ear. The council being dismissed from hence and gone, still Craterus plies the king, still in his ear, still whispering to him privately alone, urging, it seemed, quick dispatch of fear. For they who speak but privately to kings do seldom speak the best and fittest things. Some would have had him forthwith stoned to death according to the Macedonian course, but yet that would not satisfy the breath of busy rumour, but would argue force. There must be some confessions made within that must abroad more satisfaction win. Craterus with Caenus and Ephestion do mainly urge to have him tortured, whereto the king consents, and thereupon they three are sent to see it accomplished. Racks, irons, fires, the grisly torturers are hideously prepared before his face. Philotas, all unmoved, unchanged, appears, as if he would death's ugliest brow outface, and scorned the worst of force, and asked them why they stayed to torture the king's enemy.
That part was acted well. God grant we hear no worse a scene than this, and all goes clear. So should worth act, and they who dare to fight against corrupted times should die upright. Such hearts kings may dissolve, but not defeat. A great man, where he falls, he should lie great, whose ruin, like the sacred carcasses of scattered temples, which still reverent lie, and the religious honour them no less than if they flood with all their gallantry. But on with our report.
Straight were hot irons applied to sear his flesh, then resting racks his comely body strain, then iron whips, and then the rack afresh, then fire again, and then the whips again, which he endures with so resolved a look, as if his mind were of another side than of his body, and his sense forsook the part of nature to be wholly tied to honour, that he would not once consent so much as with a sigh this punishment.
Yet doth he like himself, yet all is well. This argument no tyrant can resell. This plea of resolution wins his cause, more right than all, more admiration draws. For we love nothing more than to renown men stoutly miserable, highly down.
But now?
We fear that, but oh, if he ought descend, leave here, and let the tragedy here end. Let not the least act now of his at last mar all his active life and glory past.
I must tell all, and therefore give me leave. Swollen with raw tumours, ulcered with the jerks of iron whips that flesh from bone had raised, and no part free from wounds, it irks his soul to see the house so soul disassed, wherein his life had dwelt so long time clean, and therefore craves he, they would now dismiss his grievous tortures, and he would begin to open all wherein he had done amiss. Straight were his tortures ceased, and after they had left him to recover sense, he said, now, Craterus, say what you will have me say. Wherewith, as if deluded or delayed, Craterus in wrath called presently again to have the tortures to be reapplied. When whatsoever secret of his heart, which had been foreconceived but in a thought, what friend soever had but took his part, in common love he accused, and so forgot himself, that now he was more forward to confess than they to urge him thereunto, whether affliction had his spirits undone, or seeing, to hide or utter, all was one. Both ways lay death. And therefore he would vie now to be sure to say enough to die. And then began his fortunes to deplore, humbly besought then whom he scorned before, that Alexander, where he stood behind the traverse out of sight, was heard to speak. I never thought a man that had a mind to attempt so much had had a heart so weak. There he confessed that one Hegelocus, when first the king proclaimed himself Jove's son, incensed his father's heart against him thus by telling him that now we were undone, if we endured that he which did disdain to have been Philip's son should live and reign. He that above the state of man will strain his style and will not be that which we are, not only us condemns, but doth disdain the gods themselves with whom he would compare. We have lost, Alexander, lost, said he, the king and fallen on pride and vanity. And we have made a god of our own blood that glorifies himself, neglects our good. Intolerable is this impious deed to gods whom he would match, to men he would exceed. Thus having overnight to Hegelocus discoursed, my father sends next day for me to hear the same, and there to us all he had said to him, he made him re-say, supposing out of wine the night before, he might but idly rave. When he again, far more enraged, in heat and passion more, urged us to clear the state of such a stain, conjured us to redeem the commonweal, and do like men, or else, as men conceal, Parmenio thought, whilst yet Darius stood, this course was out of season, and thereby the extinguishing of Alexander's blood would not profit us, but the other's powers might make all the Orient and all Asia ours. That course we liked, to that our counsel stands. Thereto we tied our oaths and gave our hands. And as for this, he said, for dimness plot, though he were clear, yet now he cleared him not, and yet the force of rats at last could do so much with him, as he confessed that too, and said that fearing Bactra would detain the king too long, he hastened on his ends, lest that his father, lord of such a train and such a wealth on whom the whole depends, should being aged by his death prevent these his designs and frustrate his intent.
Oh, would we had not heard his latter jar! This all his former strains of worth doth mar. Before this last his spirit's stouts commends, but now he is unpitied of his friends.
Then was Demetrius likewise brought in place and put to torture, who denies the deed. Philotas, he avers it to his face, Demetrius still denies. Then he espied a youth, one Calin, that was standing by. Calin, said he, how long wilt thou abide, Demetrius, vainly to avouch a lie? The youth, that never had been named before in all his tortures, gave them cause to guess. Philotas cared not now to utter more than had been privy to his practices. And seeing they had as much as they desired, they with Demetrius stoned him unto death. And all whom dimness named to have conspired with grievous tortures now must lose their breath. And all that were allied which could not fly are in the hands of justice now to die.
What must the punishment arrive beyond the offence, not with the offender make an end?
They all must die who may be feared in time to be the heirs unto their kindred's crime. All other punishments end with our breath, but treason is pursued beyond our death.
The wrath of kings doth seldom measure keep, seeking to cure bad parts they lance too deep. When punishment like lightning should appear to few men's hurt, but unto all men's fear. Great elephants and lions murder least, the ignoble beast is the most cruel beast. But all is well, if by the mighty fall of this great man, the king be safely freed. But if this hydra of ambition shall have other heads to spring up in his stead, then hath he made but way for them to rise who will assault him with fresh treacheries, the which may teach us to observe this strain, to admire high hills, but live within the plain.
And thus ends the play. Well, I can see why this got Samuel Daniel in trouble, that the king is pretty much shown to be in the wrong, that not one of his advisors tells him to spare Philotas. Craterus or Craterus, in fact, several of them spur the conviction on, and Philotas is very much portrayed as being in the right, and the moral. Daniel seems to draw the moral of don't draw the wrath of kings, but he also doesn't show kings to be just. And there's a newish king on the throne of England and Scotland both, not new to Scotland, but new to England. Yeah, you can see why James got a little bit pissed off with this. I don't know, if you were King James, what would you think? Elizabeth, then Rachael.
I don't know. I think that we were discussing that it's got that Essex vibe to it and the Queen and things like that. But I was really kind of taken to the story of Cromwell, and how he was kind of plotted against by the nobility, and they kind of whispered in the king's ear, and that's how he kind of lost his life. And then, later on, the king was like, "Oh, I've killed the greatest servant I could have had." I don't know if anyone else saw that link.
Yeah, definite Thomas Cromwell feels Thomas as opposed to Oliver, but yeah, because Thomas was what's missing is I guess that Cromwell was not nobly born, and therefore the nobles had a reason to make common cause to shoulder him out. But what we do have in common here is that they're both men of uncommon gifts, who rise high and therefore become targets. So yes, Rachael, we come to you.
No, nope.
Nope, that's completely okay. I hallucinated a raised hand. If I hallucinated a raised hand, then whose hand did I miss? Let's go around the room for final thoughts in any case. Greg, do you have any final thoughts here?
I'm still shell-shocked. After having been here for the whole thing, wow, from that arresting, for those that weren't here on Tuesday, there is the first line of the play that Philotas speaks is a letter from his dad, and it just grabbed me by the and I thought, wow, we were joking, if you, well, is it going to be carried through? And if it is, oh God, help the people who are rustling their sweet packets at the start and who don't hear the first line of the play, because actually very much set the scene for the rest. I was blown away by both, not so much the ones in that long scene, and I think in that long scene I'd probably pare down the number of characters. Just got so many people that turn up and speak in that. It's like, how many people? But the one I had at the start of this evening, and the one and even more so, what's his name? The one who had the conversation with Parmenia in his head. Two really incredible, beautifully written. No, very interesting, and yes, I can see why it got him in trouble. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. By the long scene, do you mean the court scene? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would cut the number of characters. It seems to me that only about 5 people speak. And I like the sense, having a lot of people on stage gives you a sense of Philotas being surrounded and by people who wish his ruin and are actively working towards it. So Tom, any final thoughts?
Just a beautiful play. I mean, it chimes with so many things that are happening and we've seen happen, and yeah, it was lovely, well written, and as I say, just touches on so many themes that you can't help but go, yeah, that was a good read, or a good watch, or a good meal, or a satisfying episode, if you like. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, it does touch on a lot of different things, and it does, like, the mark of the good neoclassical tragedy does it manage to humanize these historical characters, or historical legendary characters, and I think it does that. Desna, any final thoughts?
I'm still slightly recovering from having to read the torture scene out, if I'm honest. Yeah, and it was I lived that little bit. So having been involved with kind of just half of the thing, it's I agree kind of with what Tom was saying. I can see the parallels with current politics and current conflicts, and I agree that it's got a really martial flavour that sort of you can spot in other things that are going on in the world. But also I think I can see also how if I was the king and this play was being put on, I'd be a little bit concerned, because it's sort of a critique of a certain kind of monarchy, way of being a monarch, that you might not want to hear if you were on the throne. But it's good. We should keep critiquing monarchs.
Yeah. I mean, Elizabeth's Queen Elizabeth's absolutely had tortured people in the Tower. James did the same. It was the ugly side of law enforcement, it's since executions were public, torture often was not, but some executions got pretty graphic, and we've seen quite a few very graphic descriptions of deaths. Greg, there was one in what was it, Tancred and Gismund, of the death of Gismund's suitor, Giscard, was very, very graphically described, and it's becoming a feature in these messenger speeches, and we'll see, I guess, how that feeds into the Jacobean theater of blood as we go on. Lynsey, do you have final thoughts?
They're not so much final as I really wish I'd been here on Tuesday when the first part of this was done, because it seems like a very it's a very unusual text, I think. I mean, to go from that, what we're calling the courtroom scene, and then we have the Persian and the Grecian, the sort of, common people from different countries talking about rulership and leadership, and then we have this extraordinary messenger scene at the end. I mean, it just seems structurally very interesting as well, and politically fascinating, given the time it was, we think, written or at least published, and everything that was going on, and still very contemporary, alas. So I think it's really interesting text, and I just wish I'd been here for the first part.
Yeah, I rather wish I had too, but you, the viewer, can see the first part on our YouTube channel. You can see both parts. That way you'll know more than any of us. Elizabeth, final thoughts?
My only thought about the texts so far was just the fact that it was really designed to be listened to. I just found a sense of like the messenger Nuntius at the end, kind of relaying the events that happen to all the characters, and we have to kind of listen very carefully and intently. And as we listen, we're kind of having all these tortures unfold and things like that. I thought that it was one of those plays that really does demand to be listened to. I don't know who famously said that you go to hear a play, but in this one, I think that's particularly true.
Yes, absolutely. And it does, even though we know that Samuel Daniel put this on in various places, including at court, dumbass. I'm just calling Daniel a dumbass, not anyone in the room. Even though we know that Daniel had this put on in various places, including at court, it does read like a closet drama, which was meant to be read among a small group of listening people. So, let's see. Whomst have I not asked for final thoughts? Rachael! I would love to have final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I like Samuel Daniel. I hope we come back to this one with a second look. The same for Cleopatra. Yeah, I am surprised that he said this much, and that he was. I can see why, like, the rest of the room can see that he got called in, and people had an issue with this play later on because it's so. It is so political. Any more than that, I think I've just forgotten. But there's so many good bits in this. He's just so fantastic. Also, this is what I wanted to say. It's sort of to what Lynsey was saying before, that we do have that Persian and the Greek, and we have this mix of classes. We don't often get, I guess, people whose classes are undefined or who are of the lower class. That we don't usually get them unless it's just for a clowning scene or something like that. But here we have your average person talking in a straightforward, very philosophical way. That, and not just that, but that this trial itself, what was going on amongst the nobility, was making the common people question the realm of government, which I don't think government wants. I don't think they would want something like that, because it does smell of more rebellions. And I know in some places, maybe not the UK, that there were peasant revolts and things like that. So very interesting on so many levels. Yeah, hope we come back.
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? You know, I agree that I would love to see this done as a second look, and maybe also Cleopatra, which is such a fascinating play. Lots of available, of course, on our YouTube channel as a first look. In Cleopatra, again, it's very neoclassical, so there's a lot of reported action, and the result of that is that everyone gets to play Cleopatra at one stage because everyone gets to report something she said, often at length. So it felt very modern in that way, and it's worth noting that that play may also have gotten him in trouble because after he published it, his first patron, Mary Sidney, the Countess of Pembroke, stopped being his patron. So, and she was the dedicatee of that play, so maybe she resented it a bit, or who knows, maybe it was a personal thing. Drama, we'll never know. Daniel did write an apology for the end of this play, saying, "I didn't mean anything." He said, "Stop calling me a dumbass." But we will never stop. Anyway, it just remains to me to thank all of our wonderful readers, to thank you, the viewer, and to wave to you for good night. Good night.